Hi to everyone in the room. My name is Konrad. I hope also people online are still with us. Yeah, Mariana also already introduced this challenge, regional reanalysis for Europe, a downscaling project or downscaling challenge. Now in the video, okay. As you see, we are a rather big team for this challenge, and this is why I also brought some other colleagues with me. They're not on the video, but you will see them later on. Irene and Sebastian. They will come in later, but we also had quite some mentors, and you already know Mariana, but we also had some more, so big team, a lot of mentors, obviously. And Mariana already introduced you to the problem we faced. So on the one hand side, we have ERA 5, which is a rather coarse resolution data set. And on the left side, you see the resolution we aim for, which is Sarah at 5.5 kilometers spatial resolution. And we have to plug in something in between. We have to find a means or something to get the job done to come from here to there. How was this done? Actually, we were quite ambitious. We didn't do this with only one model, but we aimed to do 3 different things and compare these different models on the go. As you see, we have one baseline model where I will talk a little bit about, which is a statistical model called SAMOS. And we have 2 machine learning approaches where Irene and Sebastian will talk a little bit more about. We have different approaches, but all 3 have something in common. And this is what is indicated by this blue box down here. We are not using the absolute values of surface temperature, but we're rather calculating standardized residuals or standardized anomalies beforehand. And this is done by modeling linear trend and seasonality, removing this climatology, and then getting standardized anomaly, which we use as input data for all the 3 models. So, as I said, we used one statistical model as a kind of baseline model, which is called SAMOS. And the idea of these standardized anomalies actually comes from the SAMOS modeling, which is utilizing this technique to remove location specifics beforehand, and especially for temperature, it's also important that we have no elevation specifics included in the data anymore. And we also remove season-specific characteristics by using standardized anomalies, and therefore it's possible to fit one statistical model for the whole research domain. As you see, we didn't aim for all of Europe, but we rather selected one kind of case study region, one start region, which is, can be seen here, which is somewhere in Spain. So after modeling, after applying, for example, this linear model as a reference, we have to add the climatology again to the predicted standardized anomaly. You see here. So we apply the climatological spread and the climatological location again to get the final prediction. This is the same for all the 3 approaches. So how does the outlook look like in case of SAMOS? You see one specific field here, and on top left you see ERA 5, a bilinear interpolation. So you see a rather smooth field here. On top right, you see the target. So this is what we aim for. And below we see the statistical model output for this specific day and time. So you see that we have a lot more small-scale structures in our predicted SAMOS output, but we still have some differences. The previous presentation already gave a good introduction on how to quantify or visualize the degree of how good we are in predicting structures. And to the right here, you see again power spectral analysis, where you have to the right the small-scale structures, and to the left the large-scale structures. So the frequency increases to the right. And the line below is this rather smooth field of bilinear interpolated ERA 5. And the two lines above, the dashed line is the Samos prediction, and the solid line is the target, zero, are pretty close. So we're far better with Samos to show small-scale structures than we are with the bilinear interpolation as another kind of baseline. I have to give a shout out to the next team presenting, DeepR, because we're using some of their code for the validation. We chose to do this because then you can compare the figures produced by us and produced by them. We're working on the same problem. And I want to show you just one case here for this validation, a specific location in Spain, in northern Spain, a national park, Picos de Europa, where I pick out one time series. In this time series, you see the red line, which is the bilinear interpolation, in yellow, the Samos output, and in the black line, the observation with zero data. So you don't see a lot from this time series, but you see that the reddish colors are more on top. If we just look at the errors, we see a clearer picture. We see we have rather visible bias in the bilinear interpolation, and this bias is removed by this Samos downscaling approach. To the right, you see the error distributions, where you clearly see Samos is oscillating somewhere around zero, but bilinear interpolation has an obvious bias. So we do a good job in bias correction, but the error is varying to a similar degree than bilinear interpolation. This is also visible if we take a look at the months of the year, so the variation over the year, that we have bias correction which is working all over the year, where the yellow boxes are close to the green observation boxes, but by linear interpolation, actually there's an error, by linear, not by cubic, shows always a little bit higher temperatures. The same is the case for all the times of the day. So if we aggregate the predictions for each time of the day, then we're much closer with the Samos downscaling to the observations than we have with bilinear interpolation. So if we expand this in space and take a look how this varies in space, we can also see huge differences. The bilinear interpolation shows much higher errors, but to be fair, the color scale is quite big on this plot. So that you don't see any variations here doesn't mean that there are no errors. So I made probably more fair plot here, just showing the Samos output. You see the root mean square error here, image here in the center, and see that there are some errors which are also quite high for this downscaling, more than 2 degrees. So in the next step, you can ask, where do they come from? And obviously the errors get higher, the more variation is in the time series. And this variation is also obviously bound to elevation. So probably it would be in the next step good to also add topography as another predictor to our model, but we didn't do this because we wanted to be as simple as possible with this baseline scenario with this Samos. Okay, so I hand over to Irene to tell you something about machine learning.
Thank you. Yeah, hello from my side as well. So for the unit, we had quite ambitious ideas to test 2 unit configuration, different configuration of loss functions, and also different configuration of input files. But in principle, the idea was similar to Samos. We used the residuals as input, and we had to normalize them. So the residuals are still in a range between roughly -8 to +8 degrees Celsius. So we did normalize the input as well for the unit using set normalized field. And one model is based on the publication of Shah et al. For temperature downscaling and the ECMWF course of last year. in May. And the idea of SHA was to either only have temperature as target or temperature plus the high resolution topography as target field. I'm not jumping ahead, but you will see some issues with the topography as additional target. It has 3 decoder encoder layers. I did play around a bit with the normalization, but in principle, it's not a very deep unit. And the small unit is our own definition, really targeted to the domain we are using here. Can also work with both temperature or temperature plus topography as output. There are differences in the activation functions in the kernel size. What we did for both, because we ran into issues computation-wise and time-wise, we restricted the training period to 2010 to 2016, which will also be one of the reasons why we are not able to beat SAMOS. And additionally, what is still built in is we could also work with the raw data and not the anomalies. And there are different loss functions possible, but we focused here on the inversely weighted MSE loss to account for outliers. So first results of the unit small, that one used topography as additional target. In principle, you would say it's not that bad, but it's what we see here, and this is a result of the short training period. We have this nasty, in the top left corner, we have this nasty, let's say residuals, which is some sort of mishap in the filtering. And this pops up at different places during the period we are forecasting and is a result of this short training period. So we need to extend the training period, but we also need to extend the epochs. What we do see in the density is that basically we're not able to beat SAMOS here for this time step. Also looking here into this unit, if we transfer it back and look at Picus Europa, it's basically the climatology, so we have hardly any variation at all with that unit. And this is, if we jump to the SHA net, this is what we think is related to using the topography as additional target, because we did see quite heavily in the predicted residuals, even before adding back the climatology to the predictions, that we see the topography, and you see it here as well. We see the topography in the predicted residuals, and you don't see them in the SHA, which did not use topography as additional target. So this is one of the reasons why the small unit did not work out as we thought, and why we think that if using residuals is input to something like a unit, not using topography as additional target is advisable. Similar for the error. And if we compare the unit versus the SHA version without topography versus SAMOS, we see that we are not bad with this not perfectly trained unit, but we are still not there where we should be, and we are simply not able to beat SAMOS in this case. And you also see here in the RMSE, you see these nice artifacts in the RMSE plot, which are the result of this short training period. So it's not exactly comparable to SAMOS, and there's still some work to do for the unit. And now I'm handing over to Sebastian and the GAN.
Yeah, hello. Now we have a quick overview of the GAN that we use. So we use the conditional GAN that was developed by Harris et al. In 2022. You can see the architecture on the right-hand side, but I won't go into detail. I'll only mention that the GAN was originally designed for downscaling precipitation, but because we used it as Irene already mentioned, in the form of a purely super resolution problem. We just had to adapt it a little bit, mainly all of the pre-processing pipelines and a little bit about the infrastructure around it, such that we can use it for this purely super resolution problem. The second step is, or the second part is that we had to adapt it for the residuals. So because our input, again, is only the standardized anomalies, no absolute values. And second, yeah, we have the same as before, only the low resolution temperatures input feature with high resolution orography and the land sea mass. And last but not least, we use the Wasserstein loss for training and optimizing the GANs. So here we have the same example as before. This is just one single day. So if we focus first on the right-hand side, what we can see is that we have a much better performance from the GAN compared to the UNet in terms of the smaller scale structures. And if we now look on the left-hand side, on the very bottom left is the field for this day, or for this hour, for this time step, is the field, and we can see that the spatial structures are very comparable to the truth, or also to SAMOS in terms of what kind of spatial scales are resolved. If we look on the second column and compare the differences, we can also see that the differences are rather that we have some kind of warm bias in the GAN overall. If we compare SAMOS and GAN across the whole out of sample validation period, which was from 2019 to the middle of 2021, we can again see also in the error metrics and RMSE that we have those spatial structures. We have especially larger errors in mountainous regions. There are some small spots where the GAN, also in some of the southwestern parts, where the GAN has a lower RMSE in mountainous regions, but overall you can see that the error is of course a bit larger than what we have with SAMOS. And here we have again the similar plots for the mountainous region in the north of Spain, because the Europa, and we can see that the errors are from the GAN are a little bit more have a larger spread, and we also have a small bias, again the one bias that we just saw compared to SAMOS. And we can also see this on the right-hand side with the box plots, that the spread in different time aggregation periods is a little bit smaller, and that we have the warm bias again. But what we can also see mainly in these figures, that we don't have a specific month or a specific season that causes problems, but it's rather a general source of the error. And with this, we're already on the last page. So probably many people here know the comic on the right-hand side here. It's quite a common comic that you see in machine learning, where you make fun of this principle of just trying over and over again with more data to get the correct results. And this is in some sense also a part of the quintessential moral of the story that we had a little bit in this project, because we had some issues, some that we could tackle, some that we could tackle less so. So the main limitation, the main takeaway was that we had some time constraints and hardware issues. So to close the loop, what we initially wanted to do is to predict 3 hours, 3-hour time steps, the data, not hourly data, but 3 hourly data, and for 8 times, so 00 UTC, 03 UTC, etc. And due to the time limit, we only managed to complete the 00 UTC, and even this only with limited architectures. So again, some experiments with the units and the conditional GAN only with a smaller network size than what we initially wanted to do. So it's not as far as we wanted to do, but we still learned some lessons. So one point was that Samos already produces a very good baseline, which might sound intriguing because it's basically based on linear regression. But the reason why it already performs quite well is because we're using standardized anomalies. So we're taking away the fitted climatology and only predicting on the residuals. And this just works quite well as a baseline. And next, Irene mentioned already some issues with the topography or some interesting behavior. And the reason for this is also basically because of these standardized anomalies, because in the fitted climatologies, the topography is already indirectly included because we're using temperature, and temperature climatologies are dependent or are related to the topography, of course. So that's why, in some sense, in the units, it produced better results to not use the topography. Yeah, we still had some filtering artifacts in the units that we saw. And finally, for the conditional, again, the results were still like underperforming compared to Samos. And the output was sometimes a bit under-dispersive. Of course, the solution, like also depicted in the comic, is to try a larger network, to try longer training, to use more training data. The training data was also a limiting factor because we split the training into these 3 hourly time steps, which meant that we overall, our order of magnitude for the samples was like 10 to the 3rd power, which is quite low because usually you have like 10 to the 5th or 10 to the 6th power of sample. So more training or more training samples would definitely help to couple these issues. Even though this might sound pessimistic, it was still good to just get a feeling of how these standardized anomalies perform, how well or how useful it is to use these fitted climatologies and predict only anomalies. And it was still, to some extent, successful in the sense that even though we used a quite small network, so for example, a couple of those that we tested here finished training in a couple of hours, compared to the initially large network that we wanted to use, which would take a training time of 1 week for just one single model training step.